And the Secretary of State. Let's listen.
Good afternoon. It's a very good afternoon because at long last I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. Thank you.
Folks, credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you. I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
I think the way he's leaving office has been, frankly, pretty terrible. He's going to be remembered for a few things. But politically, it's mostly for when he was vice president, he and Obama sort of ushering in the Trump era initially. And then as he's leaving office as president, bringing back Trump and Trumpism stronger and more popular than ever. Today, Biden has like a 61% disapproval, and Trump is over a 50% approval and more popular, and his ideology is more popular than it's ever been. If everything you say is true, the Democrats should have had no trouble getting reelected in this election, yet they were.
It's an issue of a communications failure.
I know, and for Democrats, it's always been about communication and no introspection about the policies that led to him leaving office as one of the most unpopular presidents. When I watch this tonight, I remain astonished that he, his family, and other people around him thought he could ever run for another term. I mean, there's no way he could serve another 6 months, let alone another 4 years. The fact that they pursued that farce for as long as they did, to me, remains one of the most astonishing things about this term.
And a hostage deal has been reached by Israel and Hamas, the elements of which I laid out in great detail in May of this year. This plan was developed and negotiated by my team and will be largely implemented by the incoming administration. That's why I told my team to keep the incoming administration fully informed, because that's how it should be, working together as Americans. This will be my final address to you from the American people from the Oval Office.
Biden presented a deal like this in May. So what's your take on what got us to this moment?
Well, tragically, the deal could have been made or struck in March, again in May, and it was rehashed or rekindled in July and in August, and Mr. Netanyahu refused. I mean, Hamas wasn't very helpful, let's be honest, but it was Mr. Netanyahu ultimately that rejected the deal. At the time, he wanted to prolong the war for political reasons. Going into the summer, he said, I should wait for the American election, see what transpires. Once President Trump was elected and became president-elect, Netanyahu set a date, the 20th of January, inauguration date. And he extended the war for no apparent reason, for no utility, for no tangible or attainable goals for months. And so if you're asking what the game changer was, what the reason that brought him to say yes now, as opposed to the many resisting no's in previous months, it was the Donald Trump factor. It's not that Trump pressured him. It's that he's afraid of the unpredictability and transactionality of Trump that Trump is known for, that caused him to say, I better get on his good side and I should do this now.
Dana, are we looking at a failed presidency? This is a one-term guy. This is complete repudiation by the American people. 33% approval rating. Many people see this as a failure.
So you and I sit together every day on the 5, and you know that I try to be really nice. And I intended to find something that I could say, wow, that was great. So news of the day at the top, understandable. Big soaring attempt at a rhetorical push for unity. I'm like, okay, I'm following. And then, like, what in the world was he talking about? For example, when he talks about dark money, does he not remember that just last week he gave the Medal of Honor, or Medal of Freedom Award to George Soros? He talked about the fact that they had the biggest economic rebound than ever. He never mentioned COVID, which was the entire premise of his presidency. Today, I looked at a poll. Britt mentioned our poll. There was another poll, the Gallup poll. They asked about 18 issues. Which ones are you feeling better about? Only 1 out of 18 did people feel better about, and it was gay, lesbians, and trans issues. So he's sitting there talking about all of these things that he's done, and I'm just like, this rings hollow. To me, it felt like the speechwriters have already left the building and that they asked ChatGPT to write a speech for Joe Biden in which he doesn't remember that he was president for the last 4 years. If you ask people, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? The answer is no, except for maybe the solar companies and the Delta smelt.
Here are the final numbers now. Our poll, Fox, favorable, 40%. CNN, same day, different poll, favorable, 33%. What's your take? Now, Carl.
Well, I thought it was a dreadful farewell address from the president. If these things were all so important, if we really are facing a problem of the rich are not paying enough and have too much power, what did you do about it during the last 4 years? All these things that he forecasted. You think we need to amend the Constitution? Why do you mention it literally in the last week that you're in office? If you're worried about social media and the impact on our children, why didn't you make that a priority when you came into office rather than, again, mentioning it as you go out? I was particularly taken aback by the demagoguery that he had about the rich not paying their fair share. Think about this. 1%, the top 1% of earners in America pay 40% of the income tax revenue that we have. The top 5% pay 61%. The top 10% pay 72% of all the money that we get from the income tax. The bottom 50%, that is to say half of the people in America who are working and paying income tax, pay 3%. And the bottom 75% pay 30%, and the top 25%, 70%. So, Mr. President, would you please stop attacking people who've been successful in their lives?
Last topic here. Washington Post, very long interview with the outgoing First Lady Jill Biden. A lot of details in there, some still, the holes need to be filled in. Here's a key line about a relationship with Nancy Pelosi. It's been on my mind a lot lately, and we were friends for 50 years. It was disappointing. She's talking about June and July for the transition for Biden to get out and Harris to be elevated. How do you think that final chapter is written, Carl?
Well, with all due respect to Dr. Jill Biden, this shows how out of touch she and her husband and her sister-in-law, who guided Joe Biden's political career for so many years, Valerie Biden Owen, how out of touch they were. They thought he could win. They did not want to withdraw from the race. They thought that debate in June was a one-night bad story and they could get through it. They had no idea that the American people saw that night the worst of our fears, that he was fundamentally not up to the job. And they are so concerned about their own place and the enjoyment of the White House and Camp David and so forth that they didn't understand that this was bad for the country, that it was bad for their own party. And for her now to be angry at Nancy Pelosi for saying he is not up to it and he will lose and he will tear down our party is ridiculous. The right thing for him to have done was to have gotten out immediately after the debate and maybe not to have run at all because he was not up to it. We knew it.